one big thing Royal Caribbean is doing is putting more and more ships on the West Coast. And when I saw the news that Royal Caribbean was adding Quantum class ships to the West Coast and adding a new ship to San Diego, the first person I thought about was Vicki Freed from Royal Caribbean, Senior Vice President of Trade and Sales. Vicki, welcome to the Royal Caribbean Blog Podcast.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. And we are actually on the ovation of the Seas right now, so it's just perfect.
Yeah, and I thought of you because this journey that Royal has been on has been a long time coming. I mean, when I started Royal Caribbean Blog, I think Mariner of the Seas had canceled Royal had put an end to the plans for West Coast cruises with Mariner. And that was like, oh, okay, well, they're hitting the pause button. Cool. 10 years later, we get a ship back. And that's also with COVID in the middle of that, which probably didn't help your cause. But talk to me about your perspective on this journey, because you are from California. And this is like, I got to imagine, this is like, if you're a sports team fan and your team has been terrible for years and you finally get a chance for the team to win, like, you know, you're rooting for this. You have a horse in the race, so to speak. Talk to me about this journey that you've been on and Royal's been on to get a ship and more ships back here on the West Coast.
Well, it's true. We abandoned the West Coast for a short period of time, but our intent was to always come back to the Los Angeles area and soon to be the San Diego area. So when we come back in a big way. And as you know, we are going to be introducing 5 different ships out of the West Coast. We like to say the West Coast is the best coast.
Yeah.
And being a California girl, I would certainly have to say that. But we have Navigator of the Seas out here doing very, very well. And then the Ovation of the Seas now is joining the Navigator. And then the Quantum replaces the Ovation. And then next year, we're going to have the Voyager replacing the Navigator,
right,
just to keep it interesting, musical ships. And then we're going to be introducing the Serenade of the Seas out of San Diego. So when we finally decide to come back, we're coming back in a big way.
I remember during one of your many coffee talks you had with travel advisors about the nature of the market. I remember for years, this was a common question. In fact, you talked about this here on the ship. It's like, when are you bringing back more ships to the West Coast? And you talked about that there was a dynamic involved where basically the pricing on the West Coast was different than it was in other markets. So how has the market changed, and what are the dynamics that really make Royal Caribbean not only put a ship back, not only put a ship back, but you are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on this market. So what are you seeing that's, I don't say necessitating it, but making it, warranting this kind of push on the West Coast cruises?
Well, we have a lot of ships, so that number one, we have to find places and homes to put them. But number two is really the West Coast is a huge drive market. There's a big population out here, as we both know.
Yeah.
And so it's easy. And when things are easy for people to hop on a ship for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, people want to do it. And the itineraries are really attractive. The overnight in Cabo San Lucas is very appealing to many Californians and many West Coast people. And it's just, our focus has been so much on different core markets. One has been certainly the gaming market. So there's a lot of Las Vegas people that might choose, hey, let me just go on a ship for 3 days instead of going to Las Vegas. There's the celebration audience, people who are, bachelorette parties, weddings, anniversaries, birthday parties. And so it's an easy way to get on a ship for a short amount of time and celebrate. So the market is a strong market for us, and we're seeing really good demand and good rates.
You had Navigator here for, 25, so about 4 years or so, right? 21, she restarted over there. So you've had a lot of data to work with here. What's really stood out to you about these West Coast cruises so far? And obviously with Ovation coming here, it's going to change a little bit, but what's been your takeaway so far?
Well, I think our takeaway has really been customer satisfaction. People really love the experience on Royal Caribbean. There weren't a lot of choices out on the West Coast. And so when Royal Caribbean came out, we have a really beautiful reputation of really delivering an outstanding product. And so I think people said, I want to try something different and better and more exciting, and we're the brand.
Yeah. So I guess if it were up to you, I'm sure you would have 17 ships out here with, servicing the entire West Coast and, being the new focal point. But obviously one thing we love about Royal is there's always like that dream big attitude, right? You're never content with the status quo. And that's something I love about Royal Caribbean, is that being a market leader is not just, well, we do this. This is our MO you always dreaming big. And now we have, ships, the Quantum class ships here. Serenade going to San Diego, I think is a huge change there. That's gonna be such a big dynamic there. So where do you see the West Coast market evolving? Because Again, I've only known the West Coast market as this kind of like burgeoning market almost, which is kind of funny to say because California is not a small market. It's the number 2 market in the U.S., right behind New York. I mean, it's giant. So where do you see the future of West Coast cruises?
Well, you're right, Matt. We do dream big. And so obviously we have big ships and we have bigger ships coming, and we would love to see a bigger ship out of the West Coast. And we see it in our future. We just don't know when. But the infrastructure has to be here. And what challenges us a little bit on the West Coast are the ports of call. You don't have nearly the flexibility as you have when you're cruising out of South Florida. And so you don't have a lot of the short, getaway ports. You really just have Ensenada on the short cruise, and you do have Cabo San Lucas on a slightly longer cruise. There is Catalina. But unless you go into 7 days where you can get a Puerto Vallarta, Mazatlan, and Cabo San Lucas, you really don't have a lot of choices on ports. So no, we do not want 17 ships out here. But we could do some beautiful itineraries with slightly longer cruises.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. You mentioned destinations, and obviously it's not on the West Coast, but over on the East Coast of Mexico, some big changes over there. This has got to be like make your job, but your job supporting the travel community so much easier when you have these kind of products that just, I would say sell themselves, but my goodness, it's a difference maker, right? Having Perfect Day Mexico, the new beach clubs, the new project in Lepa, like that's all these things have to be just like, I mean, this is in your wheelhouse. It just makes it so much easier from a perspective of an attractiveness to consumers to have. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. I mean, we're not a dull or boring company. We're always thinking about what's next, and we are not complacent. So we're always looking at new destinations and new ships and new ship classes, and what more can we offer the consumer for their vacation? And consumers' vacations are changing.
Yeah.
I think after the pandemic, we saw that people put more value on vacations. They put more value on spending time with people. I think we all got a wake-up call during the pandemic that, you know what? We miss our family, we miss our friends, and we want to take vacations. And, when you think about Royal Caribbean, we're not the lowest priced product, but we certainly offer the best ROI for the vacation dollar. So if you're looking for the best bang for your vacation dollar, so to speak, I mean, we're the brand because there's so much more to offer on Royal Caribbean, whether it's the cuisine, the service, the activities, the entertainment. We have it all.
Yeah. A couple questions on that. One, value is a great point. Los Angeles cruises tend to be a really good value, I feel like, because you get a really good blend of price and product here. And obviously now with the ships coming online with Quantum or Ovation and then Quantum, that's going to change, I think, it's going to add a lot more options for folks to be able to pick and choose whether they want to go out of LA, Galveston, Miami. They have those choices there. Do you see that as an advantage for the market going forward? And like, again, different price points?
Yeah, huge advantage. And what's interesting is it is a little confusing because we're bringing ships out here and then we're moving them and then bringing new ones and different ones. And so there is a little bit of this musical ships going on. And what happens with that is it becomes a little confusing for the consumer and for the trade partner. But the good thing is the consumer who likes to cruise on a short getaway and maybe has seen the main show and in the theater, and they get a different ship going to similar places, but they get a different experience on board. So the consumer actually does like it when we change around ships.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last question for you, obviously what you do day to day, which is of course support the travel agent community that's out there. And I get a lot of questions from folks and comments about whether they want to use a travel advisor or not for their planning vacation. And, I always advocate I think it's the best thing for everybody, whether it's your first cruise, your 100th cruise, you should be using a travel advisor. I use one. But when you talk to folks, I'm sure you run into your daily life, like, oh, travel agents, they're still a thing. Like, why should I can do it on my own. I can book my cruise on my own. What do you tell those folks as like the reason to invest in that?
Well, when you find a great travel planner, travel advisor, they can make such a difference in your vacation. I use a travel advisor when I'm doing complicated trips, when I'm doing more complex itineraries where I need a little guidance, a little help. Yeah. And, I always like to say they're kind of like the value interpreter. They help you find what's the best thing for you on this particular vacation. And if you're going on a family vacation or maybe it's a multi-gen, they may suggest, this is the one time that you want to go in a star class. You want to have a royal genie who's going to help plan everything for you on board. And if you're just going away for a quick getaway, maybe a balcony room is just fine for you. So I think a travel advisor brings a lot of value to the equation, and a good one really does help make it a better experience for you.
Absolutely. Vicki, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, friends, time to answer listener emails. It's the part of the episode where I answer the emails you've sent me about a Royal Caribbean cruise. If you want to send me your emails, you can always do so by sending them to matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com, matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com. First email is from Dave from Down Under. Hi, Matt. 55 days till our first Royal Caribbean cruise on Symphony of the Seas, going to Coco Key. Thanks for all the great info. I've learned so much from your podcast. I'm a chronic over-planner. Booked Solarium dinner for 8:45 on one of our nights after a show that clashes with our 7:30 p.m. main dining room time. How does that work when it says Solarium closes at 9? Does it actually still serve food and have the buffet open till like 11, as the Solarium still takes dinner bookings up to 9, or does it actually shut at 9 with those arriving at 8:45 or 9 p.m. needing to make a late quick dash to the buffet? Good question. That refers to the seatings, not when the food actually stops getting served. So with any restaurant, if you book a reservation, if you book the last available time, which is right around like 9 o'clock time, this will serve you food. If you stay there till 11 o'clock, I mean, they'll still serve you food. So yeah, no worries there, Dave. It's just a matter of when they stop taking reservations and seating. So that's why that is the way it is. Next email is from Avery. Hi, Matt. I've been listening to your podcast since January, and I'm hooked. I've only gone on one cruise so far, but I absolutely loved it and plan to go on many more in the future. As a teacher who probably can't afford as many cruises as I like to go on, your podcast is a reminder that after a long day of dealing with middle schoolers, I can daydream about my upcoming magical, relaxing vacation. My partner and I went on Harmony of the Seas last summer with my family, and we loved it. We're going back on Harmony this summer for our honeymoon, with one stop being a perfect day at Coco Key, which we're excited for. We're also looking at doing an Alaska cruise with one of our close friends out of Seattle on Anthem of the Seas. I'd like to get it booked as soon as possible so we can lock down a good price. My partner will be changing her last name to mine after we get married, and I'm not quite sure how that will affect our booking. If we book now, do I put her current legal name and change it later? And will that force us to pay a name change fee? Or should I go ahead and book it under what her name will be at the time we sail? Sorry for the wordy email. Just want to make sure I didn't leave anything out. Good question, Avery. So the answer is, what matters is the name at the time of check-in, not the name today, rather. So my recommendation is, if you know your partner's going to change their name to whatever, at the time of sailing, that's the name you want, because not only that, it has to match, of course, their identification. So really, there are two things that matter. One is the name you give Royal Caribbean, and the other is the name matches what's on the ID. So I'm going to assume your partner, after you get married, is going to change their name to, their passport and their driver's license, things of that nature. So as long as that matches up, that's the most important thing. So anticipating that is the case, I'm going to assume that, then what I would recommend you do is book the cruise under your partner's future name, if you will, because it really doesn't matter. It's not like they look it up now or run it through a database today. It's more about what the name will be later on. So yeah, that's my recommendation going forward. Because otherwise, you're right, changing it. I mean, you could change. There is no name change fee. That's not a problem. But it just seems like one less thing to do. It'd be easier, cleaner, whatever, to just book it under the name that you know it's going to be. As an example, let me give you another example. It's like, let's say you were having a child, and you knew that in, a year from now, you're going to go on a cruise with the child, and you know the child's name. You could put the name down now. Granted, actually, in this example, this might not work because you don't have a birthday yet. All right, forget that. Just put the name that they'll be traveling under in that future date that will match their ID for that future date. That's the most important thing. So yeah, there you go. Next up, we have an email from Tom. Hey, Matt, heading on our first cruise out of Rome on Allure of the Seas in August. I have a question regarding what type of currency should I bring to tip the crew, the US dollar or the euro? Also, I plan on enjoying the casino on our trip. I assume they use the US dollar. Really enjoy your podcast and YouTube channel. And the answer is you should bring US dollars are fine. Both are fine. No one's going to turn their nose up and oh my goodness, a dollar. Royal Caribbean does operate in dollars. The casino operates in dollars. The crew members, you can make the argument, if you wanted to bring them euros, that would help them out a little bit because, inevitably when they get off the ship in the ports in Europe, they can easily use euros to purchase things in town. I would argue, I don't think they're going to have a problem with dollars at all. And certainly that wouldn't stop them from going to a conversion spot in one of these towns if need be. At the end of the day, you tipping them is more important than the currency. I would say, of course, US dollars, euros are totally fine. If you're going to be tipping in, the Turkish lira still exist? I don't know. What was it? Italian lira was always really obscure amounts. Something like that might be a problem. But US dollars are what I'm bringing when I go to Europe this summer. And if I was going on your cruise, I'd bring US dollars as well. If you wanted to tip them in euros, that'd be totally fine as well. Next email is from
I lost the email. There it is. It is from Edmund. Hey, Matt. My name is Edmund. Fell in love with Royal Caribbean on Allure of the Seas, and I binge watched all your YouTube videos in preparation for our first vacation after quarantine. Long story short, I got the drink package, bought a pack of magnetic hooks on the luggage, enlisted Lauren from MEI Travel as our travel agent, who was fantastic, by the way, and we made Royal Cruising our yearly family vacation. How many days till our next cruise? 96 till Anthem of the Seas, depending on when you receive this email. By the way, bought a pair of binoculars too, based on your suggestion. I have a question about disembarkation. For our first two cruises, the first on Allure out of Fort Lauderdale and the second out of Anthem out of Bayonne, the departure from the ship was a breeze. Felt like we walked off the promenade and then off the ship. When we took Oasis out of Bayonne the following year and we didn't change anything but the departure, it was nuts. Our line took twice around the running track and then around the main dining room, about 40 minutes to get off the ship after lining up. Our experience in Liberty that year was about equal, wrapping around, trying to fight folks off who weren't given the direction at the end of the line. My question is, if we accidentally did something wrong in terms of lining up, is there a best place to line up that would be fast, or is it really just luck of the draw? Thanks for all you do, and look forward to the next video podcast. This is an interesting question, and I've experienced this firsthand myself. I think there's a couple of different factors involved with it, Edmund, and I've experienced this in different ways. Number one is how quickly the ship gets cleared by local authorities. Remember, Royal Caribbean can't just pull up to the dock and let people off the ship as soon as they please. They have to be cleared by the local authorities. What that means is the Coast Guard and Customs and Border Patrol need to say, okay, you can let people off. In many cases, it is very much a rubber stamp. It's like, okay, they look around, everything looks good. But sometimes they do more in-depth inspections. It just depends on, the various needs and wants of that particular department. It's on the government side. It's not anything Royal Caribbean does. It's nothing that Royal Caribbean does wrong, by the way. This is just simply, the government will sometimes do more random inspections, things of that nature. So what I'm trying to say is, number one, how early your ship docks and how early your ship is cleared has a major impact. As people wake up and as people get ready and started and on their way, the lines build. As an example, if you go on Utopia of the Seas or Icon of the Seas, those two ships tend to dock extremely early in the morning, and they're very efficient with getting people off the ship. Whereas I was just on Ovation of the Seas last week, and they did not clear the ship until a little after 7. I think it was it was listed at 7:30, but I think they actually cleared it closer to like 7:15 or so. So the point is that there is a big difference if the ship can get cleared at 6:30 a.m. or 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. because the line builds very quickly. But if they can, as soon as they do that, the line starts moving, right? And the faster you get the line moving, the less of a line that you can incur. That's one aspect. You also talked about Bayonne, and I love Bayonne except for the traffic there. There's one way in, one way out, and it's not very efficient. The pickup and drop off area gets congested very easily. And that also plays a factor. But as to, you're running around, you weren't even talking about that. You were simply talking about, being in line to get off the ship. And you didn't mention times. That's the other thing I noticed. And I'm not sure exactly which one, what time you were there for, because there is a big difference if you line up at obviously 7 a.m. versus 8 a.m. Again, the more people that are on the ship and in line, the bigger they grow. The other factor is commutes. You mentioned you went out of Fort Lauderdale and Anthem. When you're in Florida, especially, there's very much a commuter mentality. A lot of people who basically want to get off the ship and commute back to work because they live in the area and they need to get back off the ship. So there's a lot more walk-offs there than maybe, other ports that Royal Caribbean goes out of. That also is a factor as to if it's a week. Basically, if your ship, disembarks on a weekend or a weekday, I think that has a factor involved with it. So, Edmund, very good email here, and I hope this helps. But basically, in terms of is there a best place to line up, I've generally found two things, and this isn't like a hard and fast rule, but I would say these two rules probably apply more often than not. Number one, there's usually two lines. One is towards the aft of the ship, one towards the front of the ship. If you can come down the forward elevators, sometimes you get lucky and they're running a second line in the forward part. There's less people in the forward part because the middle elevators, the aft elevators, serve the majority of the ship. Anyway, my point is that I generally find the forward elevators and the disembarkation point there to be a little shorter. Not always, but seems to be. The other factor, of course, is what time. If you can get off before 7:30 a.m., there's a huge difference between 7:30, 6:30 in getting in line there. It stinks waking up that early. Keeping in mind you have to be out of the room by 8 o'clock anyway, so it's not like you could sleep till 10 o'clock if you wanted to. My thought is just get going, get in line earlier, and get off the ship earlier is my usual approach there. So there you go. Thank you, Edmund, for the email. Thank you to everybody for checking out this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. Of course, if you want to send me your emails, you can do so by sending to Matt, M-A-T-T, at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.